everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program. We are going to talk today about Florida-friendly container gardening for ornamental plants. This class was scheduled to happen in November, and it had to be rescheduled, so I ended up with my only open day today on December 21st. And since it is so close to Christmas, I added a little extra, at the end of this, which is going to talk about very quickly about holiday plants. We do have some classes up that we just did for, Florida-friendly gardening and holiday plants, if you would like more detail as well. Another thing that is coincidentally occurring with the Christmas season this year in Central Florida is going to be, some pretty cold weather. So we won't have time in this particular class to discuss that, but there are several ways you can find out that information. I have pinned, or I will have pinned to the top of my page, my Facebook page, a YouTube video. You may also go to Hernando County Government YouTube and look for the video. It's called Winter is Coming. Now, I made that in 2020, so some of the dates I'm referring to, don't apply to this year when that cold occurred, but all of the information, that you can gather from that program, it will be very helpful for us to prepare for our below freezing weather that's going to be coming around Christmas Eve and Christmas time. Also, I'm going to be recording a very short pre-recorded video on the same subject, like a 10-minute one to go through very quickly. Just so you can get the main pointers. That should be available up on my Facebook page today. And if anyone would like to join us tomorrow, Thursday at 10 a.m. for the virtual plant clinic with Dr. Lester and I. We're going to discuss it, in tomorrow's program as well. But for right now, let's talk about Florida-friendly container gardening for our Florida-friendly ornamental plants. I'm Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities in the water department here in Hernando County. And my email, if you would like a copy, PDF copy of this program, you can find me at LillyB, LILLYB, 2 L's in the middle, B at hernandocounty.us to find out that information. Or if you have any questions you want to, ask me directly about preparing for the cold weather that's coming up, then, feel free to do so. Really, email's the best way to try and catch me. And Buddy just joined us, and he is listening from Tallahassee, so he's going to be dealing with even colder weather. And Buddy, I just mentioned that when you join us tomorrow for the virtual plant clinic, I'm going to go over like a little 10-minute presentation of how to deal with plants in the cold, and I'm sure we'll discuss it further. Plus, that same presentation should be available on my Facebook page very soon. Today, let's talk about, again, the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping, and here they are. And when we're talking about potted plants, all of these principles apply, just like they do for the plants in the landscape, all 9 of these principles. So let's talk about the benefits. What's the good things about container gardening? Before we even start on what I have listed here, some of the benefits for container gardening with our tender plants, since we are going to come up on a cold snap in a few days, is the ability to bring them into a warm place. That is one of the benefits. But it has a visual impact. It brings plants to your level. And even, it's very beneficial for those who may have limited mobility issues. It allows them to work on plants, and there is a whole, a whole career one could find in horticultural therapy, where just there's so many different benefits that people can get from being able to get their hands in the soil. I mean, it is shown that it actually helps reduce the chemicals that, bring depression in you. They've been doing it for many, many, many years. They started it probably, I think, in the Civil War, definitely during World War I, horticultural therapy. They may not have had that name for it, but they certainly were having the recovering soldiers, those recovering physically and mentally from what they then called shell shock. We now call, PTSD or other various things, but working with the plants really helps, gives a sense of purpose, as well as helping some of the chemicals. But also those who have mobility issues, maybe you've planted all your life and you still want to be able to do that. So, or if you have people that you work with or your parents or whoever, bringing the plants on their level where they can sit and still work on them is it's a great thing to be able to have happening, that ease of access for the gardener. Also, containers are a great way to be able to switch out some of those plants, a great way to use your annuals to switch out with the season. And here in Florida, you may be frustrated sometimes with our soil, might be a bit too sandy, or you just don't want to deal with all of the pest problems and the nematodes and et cetera. When you are dealing with container gardening, you really can control the soil medium. And most times, not all times, but they can be pretty portable, be able to move around. So let's talk a little bit about this eye-pleasing design. Design is important with pots, just like in your landscape. So believe it or not, all plants have a front and a back when it comes to, a design aspect. They have just like your Christmas tree. You deal with your Christmas tree, which side looks better that you're going to present to the living room and which side you're going to put up against the wall. Think of your plants the same way. Determine which side of the container is the primary view or the front, not necessarily the container itself. Sometimes the container itself, if it's old and, has stains on one side, you want to turn it around. But place several plants in the container. If you're going to put a bunch of plants in like an arrangement like this, you want to arrange them before you plant them. But you want to put the tallest plants in the back, and the shortest plants are at the front or the edge of the pot. And we'll get into the classic way that people design pots with your thrillers, spillers, and fillers. So more eye-pleasing design. You can use a specimen plant, something that's there all the time as the anchor. Here they're just using these house plants, very typical house plants here. And then around which colorful annuals and perennials can be planted. And here they're using very pretty containers of themselves. But, in the summer months, maybe they put in these impatiens, and it looks like maybe some sweet potato vine or something very dark purple there. You can change them out seasonally. This might be time to put in your poinsettias, things such as that. Now let's talk about this pot in pot method. See, this is showing, outside, looks like part of the landscape, but this is a professional trick. When you go to Disney World, when you go to Epcot, and think about it, have you ever seen a sad looking plant in the happiest place in the world? Of course not. And the reason is because even though it looks like they're planted in mass, you've actually got a little bit larger pots that they place the little bit smaller pots inside of, cover up with mulch. One of them starts looking bad, isn't happy. The Disney fairies sneak up behind you and you're not looking, switch them out with a nice looking plant. We can't do that. We can't afford to do that. But if we have an area where that we want to switch out a lot, I would keep those areas small, because it's, it gets expensive, and it also increases your carbon footprint if you are constantly changing out plants. But if you want to have a small area that you want to have fun with, this is the way to do it, instead of, having to deal with planting each and every single time. You just switch them out nicely, plop that in there, put the mulch over it. Who's really going to know? That's your pot in pot method. Here's what I was talking about with your classic trio, and it's interesting how they did it for this photo. So you have your upright plant, which is your thriller. You have your mounding plant, which is your filler. And then your trailing plants, which is your spiller. That's classic. And what's interesting here, what they have done is they're using the same, pretty much a hedge here, and then another anchored pot plant as their upright thriller. It's not actually in the pot, but you get that same kind of pleasing design. There's no rule out there that says you have to do it this way. I'm just letting you know this is what, some of the design suggestions. When it comes to design, it's all suggestions. There's no hard, fast rules, but some people like, having some guidelines to go by, tried and true. So here you can see they've changed it out. They have their poinsettias for, the Christmas season. And I would say if this is Florida, they put these right in right after, because we're not going to be growing petunias here in the summer. That is one of our winter annuals. Put it to end. So what stayed the same? Obviously, looks like Italian cypress or something like that, and some kind of succulent behind stayed the same. If you notice, this ivy stayed the same. And what they switched out, possibly in a pot and pot type of method, are the poinsettias for the holidays, and then the petunias for the rest of the cool season. And of course, here's your oldie but goodie, what your grandmother did, on the porch, this specimen plant. You don't have to get ultra fancy with it. Just have a really eye-pleasing, outstanding plant, such as this geranium. Again, that's going to be more, geraniums are a tricky plant for people in Central Florida. They're not going to do great in the very cold or the very hot. So kind of fall and spring kind of plant, where they're going to bloom and look really nice. But that, something that the color really catches your eye, it really stands out. Just, one specimen plant in a pot standing out. That's the oldie but goodie way of doing it. And when we're talking about large plants, think about the large leafed plants. This is Persian shield, is what's in this picture. So that brings a lot of eye attention. It's color, it's texture. See, and when we call this, when we refer to the texture in the plant world, we're going to call this bold, and or coarse. Coarse means large and bold in the horticulture world. Fine would be kind of more feathery, and medium would be something in between. So that's what those two terms mean. Coarse usually means something really big. It doesn't mean it necessarily is rough when you touch it. It's more the size and how much attention. And also this Persian shield is an example of the different literal textures in the plant, with all those veins, and it's not just a smooth surface. That really catches your attention there. And think about going with things that have some odd shapes that are different than normal, that may also bring your attention to a certain area where you would like to attract attention. Or you could go the other way and just be very soothing and, kind of, almost like IKEA looking, kind of Swedish design, just very plain and simple, but it still makes a statement. And ornamental grasses, it even has a Japanese kind of look to it. Will do that for you. And you may not have ever considered putting ornamental grasses, especially large ones like this, in pots. But here you see you have continuity with the exact same very simple white pots and the exact same upright, and then they start to weep a little bit, plants all in a row that just that soothes the eye, that makes people feel kind of calmed when they see a situation like this. Or if that's not for you, or you want to try different things in different areas of your yard, why not go with just a whole, splash of color, if that is what makes you happy, and, experiment with different interesting color combinations. The University of Florida does have publications that'll tell you annuals and winter bloomers, what to grow when. Some of the things, I don't have them listed here, but some of the things off the top of my head that you can try during the cool weather are going to be those petunias that I mentioned, pansies, snapdragons. I'm trying to think of, some of the others that, will really bring that color. And then there are some native plants that bloom in the cool weather. Climbing aster is one of them. So you can always, Google, winter bloomers, UF for University of Florida, and you'll bring up some publications which tell you which ones that may be spring flowers in your mind, from up north, but they do great all winter long here. And also, if you go to Hernando County Government YouTube, I do have classes on winter bloomers that you can find as well. Here's one thing that maybe we're kind of afraid to try to go this bold, but why not think big? Even in, some of the smaller spaces, if you keep it in a corner or something, think about some of the bigger plants that you can put in there, these palms, the Thai plants. They've got some elephant ears, which you have to be careful with some of those, because some of them can be invasive plants. But you see they have sweet potato vine, and it looks like coleus. And, just don't be afraid to put it all together and make a big splash somewhere on your patio, even in, your entryway of your home, something like that. But another way you can make things appear bigger than they are is to take those smaller containers and elevate them. There's just another little trick. See, they're up on these stools here. They're probably maybe 5-gallon, containers here. And again, they have the classic trio of thrillers, fillers, and spillers. And they look very, nice. We're going to talk about the design of pots. These are the exact same thing. They're mirroring each other, as are the plants inside, but that's not the only way you have to go. There are other ways you can play with design with the pots themselves, but actually bringing them up kind of to eye level makes a big impact as well. Here's what I was talking about with what we can do with some of the containers. There are various things you can do. You can use the same shape. If you look at these containers, some of them are the same, but they're not all the same. But they're all the basic kind of urn shape. Maybe not this one that they threw here at the bottom, but all the rest are, they've got the same kind of urn shape. You could go with every container maybe being a different shape, but all being the same color. So there's, several different ways, different colors same shape. Different shapes, same colors. You know, that always kind of looks good. Or the plants in them have the same kind of dominant plant form going on. Or you can use an accent color. If you see here, the accent color is kind of going to be this kind of purpley mauve. Where do we see it repeated? Well, first of all, it was on the house. Maybe that's what they started from. And then they chose some plants that are in the same kind of purple family. And then up here, these, you know, they pop that pink for you. Maybe that's how this got here, because it's kind of a pinky kind of container. So they started with the purpley, pinky, mauve idea of color. And then they brought that color in some of the plants and the pots, but they also brought in pots that were all kind of the same shape, even though they were different sizes and different colors, and it all kind of pulls together. You don't have to have containers, you know, just on your porch, on your patio, in your house. Why not incorporate them actually into your landscape beds? I showed you how to sneakily put them in your landscape beds by that pot and pot method, and that's just using plant liners, really, that they came from the nursery in. But if you have some great containers, and maybe they're even kind of chipped up or a little broken or something, but if you tuck them into your plant beds, you're solving several things here. You're allowing them a great place to drain. You won't have to worry about drainage because it's going right in the ground. And you're bringing, you know, some great design features into your landscape beds. Think of the plants kind of like furniture as well. You know, you don't have to put it there and it can be there all the time forever. Kind of switch them around. Maybe you need to do that with the seasons anyway, but kind of move them around like you would move around furniture. But don't take them out of, we'll go back to that right plant, right place. If it needs shade, you want it to stay in the shade. If it needs a certain amount of sun, you want it to stay there. But you can have fun, you know, like on this patio here, you know, just kind of moving them around, see what works for you. Sometimes you move them around if you're going to have company or have a different party or something. And then just, you know, play with what works best for you and for the plant. And then sometimes just refresh the plants out with different plants. As I just mentioned, right plant, right place. And the best thing to do is to group plants with similar needs in that same pot. When I say that you're going to put thrillers, fillers, chillers, or however you want to do it, they're all living together in the same little planet of your pot there. So you want to make sure they have the same kind of needs, the same light needs. The pot can only be one place, and the same watering needs. You wouldn't want to mix these succulents up with these wildflowers. Maybe you want to, but someone is going to be unhappy in this situation. Want to pop a color, maybe put you know, some drought tolerant, you know, kind of colorful plants in with these succulents. They're not going to be needed to be watered as much as these wildflowers here. Wildflowers out in your yard won't need to be watered as much as wildflowers in a pot, because pots obviously do dry out faster than plants that are in a landscape. But this is a great way, if you have a very small space, to attract some butterflies, to create a mini butterfly garden. Just make sure that, you know, they have the same type of watering and light needs. Be very careful. I have a program on my Facebook and on YouTube, Hernando County Government YouTube, talking about holiday plants, and I'll get a little bit at the end of this. And I warn people against falling for those really, really cute Norfolk Island pines that you can get as, you know, a a little Christmas tree right now, because in 10 years, it could be 80 feet tall. So, consider the plant's mature size and also the maintenance needs. And are you willing to do the maintenance that that plant might need, before you purchase it? And are you going to have to be switching out that pot more often than you want to? Or is it going to outgrow your home? You can do that pot and pot method within large containers. Instead of worrying about, planting these actually in this big, heavy cement container, just put the outer pots where you can slip the inner pots right in. Just remember, if it's in a pot though, especially in a pot, it will need to be watered more than plants that are directly in the ground. But here's just an idea. You can have. Now let's talk about container selection. Drainage is important when it comes to container selection. We're going to get little gifts for Christmas and stuff, and little plants in teapots and everything like that. Well, you probably don't want to drill into china or porcelain or anything like that. But so, consider moving that plant after a period of time. But you can really use anything, and we're going to go over some of the ideas that people have come up with. I mean, look at this colander here. They turned it into a hanging plant, I believe. It's got built-in drainage already. If it doesn't, here, they're just showing, big plastic barrels. Put some drainage holes in your plants. Now, when I'm talking about drainage, I do have to mention that one of the best things you can do, and we kind of already covered showing where you can put some pots actually in your landscape. That's probably the best case scenario. And here they've done a whole bunch. They put it in a landscape bed. And so what is going to happen to the drainage there? Right into the ground. Best thing you can happen. These, and I know everyone has seen them and used them, and it's not just because they're the cheap plastic ones. Do the same thing with a clay saucer. Mosquito control hates those. And, you can figure out why. They hold water, and you think, well, I want the plant to take the water in that way through that capillary action. But it's not a great idea. So, or if you're trying to protect the surface that it's on, just know you're going to have to be diligent of going out and dumping those. Mosquito control would like you to go out once a week. They call Wednesdays, like today, which we call hump day. They want you to think of as dump day, of going out in your yard, on your patio, wherever, and dumping any standing water. So just know that that is a source of where mosquitoes are found often. So be conscious of that and careful. And I tell the snowbirds, don't leave those kind of things lying around like that when you are not at your home, because then your neighbors will not be happy with you, because you've been a skeeter breeder while you went up north and they were left here for the summer. So, just be consciously aware of those type of situations. So here we have, I talked about plants need to be watered, potted plants need to be watered more often than plants in the ground. And if it is particularly hot and dry, possibly 3 times a week. But that doesn't mean totally drenching them. You want to apply the water in slow streams so as not to disturb the soil, because there's, they're in this little ecosystem. They they only have that much room, what is contained in the pot. So you don't want to create shallow roots or, send the dirt all out through those drainage holes. Watering early in the morning is the best idea, especially, and I tell this all the time, we have certain diva plants. They're just divas, such as impatiens, if you happen to have some azaleas in a pot, or even outside. And as soon as it gets a little bit hot, they're going to look like, oh, if you don't water me, I'm just going to die. Well, you need to talk to that diva plant and say, okay, diva, let's have this discussion again in the morning. Because it's possible that it is just heat stressed. And if it hasn't perked up in the morning, then you can go ahead and water it. Rain barrel water, your potted plants are going to love rain barrel water. But you can hand water your potted plants. There's no restrictions in Hernando County about hand watering potted plants. But just because of that, you don't want to overwater the plants though. So early morning is the best time. And again, water the soil, not the plant. Don't just stand over the plant and get the whole plant soaking wet. Yes, rain is going to do that if it's outside for sure, but we don't need to exasperate the situation, inviting potential fungus, leaf spot diseases, things like that. You know, move that plant over. You're watering the roots. You know, you don't need to water the leaves. So water the soil, not the plant. Now, some people get creative and use micro irrigation systems, such as this one, which is also not regulated by Hernando County watering restrictions. Now, this doesn't look all that attractive, but I think they pulled it out for the purposes of the picture. And maybe they try and camouflage, you know, this system a little bit more. But yeah, think about using a micro irrigation system. There are ways to retrofit them onto your existing system, and they have drip systems, they have little micro spray systems. Just again, be careful, because overwatering can cause just as much problems, just as many problems as underwatering. Now, these clay containers seem to, you know, they soak up some of the water. So again, you know, if that's your choice to use, just really be watching them and make sure that they don't dry out. What are we going to put in these containers? Well, you want to combine materials that absorb and retain moisture with materials that allow some of it to drain. So peat moss works pretty good. Peat moss, you're really going to have to keep on top of because it can way dry out. I've had, you know, issues with that. But a mixture of peat moss, the perlite, or those little white styrofoam looking, you know, materials in there. What you don't want to get is garden soil. So be careful when you go to the store and make sure the bag says potting soil, not garden soil. Those are two different things. Garden soil is something you'll want to mix with your sandy soil to create a vegetable garden. It's dense and thick and will help with the water holding, you know, capacity of your regular native soil that you might have here. It's too dense and thick for your potted ornamental plants. So potting soil for pots, garden soil for vegetable gardens. Just keep that in mind. You will have way too compacted of a soil for a potted plant to try and switch that out. So you might be thinking, I want to use some of the really, you know, the big containers like you were talking about, because I think that would be great. It would look great on my patio. But oh my gosh, how much potting soil? That's going to be very, very expensive and very heavy. So here's some tricks for large pots. Your plant doesn't need all of that pot to grow. So it's really just a decorative feature. So you can fill it up with whatever you have on the bottom. Big styrofoam chunks, you know, instead of throwing those in the landfill. Even pot liners, turn those upside down. Here we're using 2-liter soda bottles. Something to fill that space, and lightweight. All these things are lightweight. Rocks would be number one, another very expensive way to try and fill that pot. And then you've just made a lightweight pot You know, these may look clay, but they're plastic. You just made it an immovable pot. So think about, use your imagination to think about lightweight things that will take up that airspace before you put that potting soil in, and that'll help you, save some money as well as save your back a little bit. Again, just, go crazy using your imagination with container selection. Anything that holds soil and provides drainage will work. And here's just some ideas that people have used. Will they work long term? It depends on the item that you use. We are in Florida, and things outside do, with our humidity and rain and everything, rust and rot quicker than maybe they would up north. These drawers here that they put a vegetable garden on, even this guitar, I don't see these lasting 10 years by any means. They're going to start falling apart within a few years. But, it's a way to have fun. Here's somebody who made a plant bed in a bed frame. And look what they're using for the frame here, just more pots. Somebody put this climbing plant on a chair that was just going to rot away anyway. We see this done a lot where they put a hole in a wooden chair or a rocking chair to put a pot in. This wagon, it might last quite a number of years, might start to get rusty, but that's kind of what happens, adds to the mystique and the patina of your design. And I've seen it done with shoes like here, but I imagine I can see these shoes are going to start to get moldy. So, just maybe just as a fun short-term thing, and using these upright gardens and using these pallets, that has been done quite a bit lately. It's one of the new fun things to do. Here, someone lined up a bunch of rain boots, just whatever creative thing comes to your mind. Why not try it, as long as it holds soil and can hold some water. This garden, bag gardening, tote gardening, I think is what they call it. And I know the extension office has even had some classes on that, I think with wine totes or something like that. And you see they're growing vegetables here. Just have fun, whatever, you can think of to do. There's some teapots somebody collected. Make sure you have some drain holes somewhere. So once we chose our container, and we know maybe it's very large, maybe it's not. If it's very large, we filled it up with our soda bottles or whatever to fill in that space. Put our potting soil, not garden soil, in there. So we want to partially fill the container, not the whole way, and set the plants in the desired position. And then continue to adjust the root ball as needed. The final level of potting soil should be 1 to 2 inches below the rim of the container. Don't fill it up to the top. Just like planting in the ground, which we encourage you not to plant too low, same thing happens in a pot. So if you're working with one of those large containers, before you pour all that soil in there, put it where you want it to be. Just, a little hint there so you're not dragging it around. And here's an idea that nurseries are learning about, that if you get some mulch and just put a very thin layer across the top, that's going to help you in your weed battle in your containerized pot. Even if you use the big chunky pine nuggets, just lay one, one piece of pine bark, like a 1 pine bark layer, and that will help mechanically, reduce the amount of weeds. Or if you have a more finer shredded mulch, put that on there as well, and it'll help block out some of the weeds for you to make that less of a chore. Now, how are we going to maintain these? people can get carried away with the fertilization process. So we want to use it very, very carefully and use a slow release fertilizer. A lot of people I know use, these pearl type fertilizers. You don't have to go with a specific brand, and because it may also depend on what kind of plants that you have. It is much, if you under fertilize your plant, it will not die. If you over fertilize it, it may die. So keep that in mind. Pest control, the best thing to do is to scout often. And remember, stressed plants are more susceptible to pests. So if it's being overwatered, it could be more susceptible. If it's being underwatered, it could be more susceptible. If it's an inside plant, and this is more for up north, had to walk my daughter through some of this. One plant, exact same plant doing well, the other one not. The other one was at the front door. Well, if it's always opening and it's 10 degrees out there, it's not going to happen here. That could be why that plant was suffering, the other one wasn't. What could happen here is there could be an air conditioning vent blowing on it. And then suddenly, because we don't have time between air conditioning and heat, our thermostats go from one to the other. Well, if there's a vent blowing right on a plant, it hasn't acclimatized to that difference. So too much or too little water, crowding, salt damage. Where is salt damage going to come from? From that over fertilizing. Or maybe it has a nutritional imbalance. So keep an eye on it. Scout for those pests. When I say use IPM, that it means integrated pest management. And it's kind of all those steps I just talked about to try and figure out what might be causing the problem before you just run out and throw a chemical at it. And maybe it is an issue that does not need a chemical, maybe it does, but work through all the steps of integrated pest management. And you can find classes about that on my YouTube channel as well. What about just maintaining and grooming? So routinely deadhead plants to remove those unsightly dead flowers, and it'll encourage new blooms. Pinch back or tip prune plants regularly. What does that mean? Just the tips, sometimes tip pruning, so you want to keep it more compact. Or sometimes it starts getting really dry and crunchy just on the tips. You can actually cut that part off. Just cut it at an angle, and so that the leaf can still provide the service of photosynthesis to the plant, and the new leaves can come in. To keep the plant growth in check as well, and it encourages branching. You want to periodically remove some of the containers from public view. If the plant looks like it's under stress, it might need some time out from public view, and put it in a protected location to replant, or allow some recovery going on as well. So we went through that. And since we are just a few days away from Christmas, like I said, you can find this longer version of this on my Facebook or YouTube. But let's just talk a little bit of care of holiday plants. The classic #1 holiday plant is, of course, our poinsettia. And that is technically a small shrub or a tree, which can grow up to 15 feet. And it's native to Mexico and Central America. It is actually named after the first U.S. minister to Mexico in 1825, Joel Roberts Poinsett. Now, why we enjoy our poinsettias is for these modified leaves called bracts that grow surrounding the flower cluster. These are the flowers. Not that interesting, are they? But we grow them for these beautiful, colorful bracts. Usually red. Now they have pink ones. Now they have white ones. Guess what? Here in Florida, we can grow them outside. Buddy might have more of an issue in Leon County. Not sure if they can grow them that well there, but in Central and South Florida, we can certainly grow our poinsettias outdoors during, and they will do quite well. So you want to choose a full sun location. Does like moist soil. It's going to do a lot better in more of a moist soil. And the thing about poinsettias we need to remember is to prune them during the A months. So we, might have some poinsettias we're going to pick up from church or from the grocery store, or wherever, and take them home. Certainly this Christmas, you don't want to put them outside right away. In fact, you don't want to put them outside, till we're into spring to plant them in the yard. So let's say April, because maybe it's gotten pretty leggy, probably will get pretty leggy in the pot. So April's a good time to plant it outside and go ahead and prune it and get rid of all the dead stuff and prune it down so it maintains being nice and compact for you. Then leave it alone. Water it in, obviously, like you would a new establishing plant, but don't prune it or anything until August. That's why we say, remember the A months when it comes to poinsettias. Prune it real well again in August. Then don't touch it, because if you want these beautiful bracts, these beautiful red bracts, you need to not touch it after August. They say the best way to get these bracts, and the reason you get them all red and beautiful in the potted plants all over the place now, is because what they've done in the greenhouse is force them into producing these red bracts by turning off all light at night. So if you have it in your yard, the best case scenario for you is to put it in a place that is dark all night long. So not under a porch light, not under a street light. And that is the best way to get these beautiful red bracts. Having said that, you see here, then this is a photo I took of actual poinsettias. Now there were street lights there, and you can see there's a porch light there. So the poinsettia is healthy. It's really healthy looking, but you can see where the bracts didn't occur except further away from where that porch light was on. And this was done just with, a friend of mine put these here. You can see it's by, this pipe, so it's a fairly moist soil. It was more east in, more inland, a more wet area in actually downtown Brooksville. It's at a funeral home. He worked there, and he took the half-dead poinsettias that nobody picked up at the church next door, mid-January, and would plant them year after year. And there were street lights, and then there is this porch light. But as you can see, under the porch light, not many red bracts. Over here in the more darker areas is where they were able to grow. They can be susceptible to a freeze, so you want to cover them and protect them. They are relatively pest-free. They might get some spider mites or some leaf spots if there's rain dripping off of a gutter or something. So, first get that diagnosed before you go out and get a product to use on them. How about our Christmas cactus? It's not really a cactus, it's a tropical plant. And we know there are several different species. They require more humidity than a true cactus, which is why they do so great on our porches here in Florida. And you may think, well, they're really magic that they know when Christmas is. Today's the winter solstice. Today's the longest amount of darkness, that we are going to have all year. That's what the plant is responding to. They actually bloom when we have less hours of daylight. So they call them Christmas cactus because Christmas occurs around the winter solstice when there is, the least amount of daylight. That's what they're responding to. That's why they're going to bloom. You know, if they're not blooming, it may be that they are also under a porch light, getting too much light in the evening through the night. That could be, you know, it's disturbing that its own circadian rhythm if a plant, you know, has that. And then there are Thanksgiving cactus, there are Easter cactus even. These are pretty easy to grow all year round. And we see them hanging on porches. Porches are the best place because they like that filtered sunlight and they don't want to be rained on. So if you put it outside, like on a stump all through the summer, it's going to get way too much rain. So you want to water thoroughly only when it's completely dry. You put your finger in there and it just comes out, you know, like sand or dust. And it will grow the best with no direct sun and not getting all of the rain. It'll love your humidity. It'll eat that up. But so a porch is the best place. If it's little pads, which are the leaves, start to get kind of droopy, we know it's too dry. If the tips are getting red, then it's out in too much sun. So again, starting in mid-October, the plant needs 12 hours a day of darkness and some cooler temperatures. So other years when your Christmas cactus may not have bloomed, it could have been a couple of things, as I mentioned, not having that 12 hours of darkness, or maybe it was a very warm year and it just didn't get cold enough here. So this is a hanging plant behind another cactus. Everybody gets confused with this picture. There is no Christmas cactus trees that I'm aware of. Here's our other fun plant that is quickly becoming a Christmas classic. And we can grow these like crazy in Florida, this amaryllis. For Christmas, they're grown from forced bulbs in small pots, but we can take those and plot those right in the landscape, plant them in mass. They come in so many different colors and can be so gorgeous. If it's grown in the garden, it'll generally bloom each spring. And unless you're getting some major overcrowding, you don't, you know, have to divide them. As was mentioned, they come in a variety of so many different pretty colors. They do prefer a little bit of light shade, but they won't bloom in deep shade. Yet the leaves will yellow in the bright sun. So you got to find that sweet spot somewhere in your yard. You can plant them here anytime, but the winter months are the best. It requires well-drained soil, which we generally have that in Florida. And unlike some that, you know, you put the bulb, you know, pretty much on top of the soil, you want to plant the bulb neck deep. This is where people, you know, this is where they mess up. They don't plant them 12 to 15 inches apart. They're going to spread. They're going to start spreading like crazy. So go ahead and plant them like that. Add some mulch, compost, you know, some type of organic matter there. And you want to keep it moist there, but not waterlogged to grow your beautiful amaryllis. Yes, this is what the lover grasshopper, their favorite thing in the world is your amaryllis to eat. They prefer bulb plants in general, but they seem to really love your amaryllis. If you find them, look for them when they're small and they congregate in groups then, and they're black with a little red stripe. Find them, get yourself a big, like, you know, a big cup, like maybe like this, with a lid, that you can get at 7-Eleven or something. You don't have to use the, you know, this reusable cup, but fill it up with soapy water, just dish liquid. Take that group of lover grasshoppers and swish them in there and put that lid on. That is, you know, one of the best ways to try and take care of them. Don't panic if you see them. Now, Dr. Lester and I did get a phone call from a person who was calling for a resident of a gated community around here. And she just claimed these leopard grasshoppers ate her entire landscape. We don't usually find, that leopard grasshoppers eat an entire landscape. Well, let's talk about diversity, which she did not have. She had a monoculture of amaryllis. So if you only have almost entirely one plant, an insect who loves that plant is going to wipe out your landscape, or a disease that attacks that plant is going to wipe out your landscape. So that's where diversity of plants is the most healthy way to go. But you can leave those bulbs in the ground for years. It's not like up north where you got to dig them back up and put them in the cellar, because we don't have any cellars anyway. And, you can leave them right in the ground. Remove the spent flower stalks before the seed pods are produced, or the flowering will be reduced in the next season. You can fertilize with a balanced fertilizer 2 to 3 times during the growing season, pretty much March through September. And here is a link to a University of Florida publication on it. But don't worry about trying to memorize that weird address down there. You just write in Google Amaryllis UF for University of Florida. You'll find a great publication on it. So thank you for joining me for this container gardening discussion today with a little bit of holiday plants grown in there. Again, you can find more detailed information about holiday plants and also about cold protection, because we do need to discuss that in the upcoming days. I have pinned to the top of my Facebook page a program I made in 2020 about winter is coming. If you would like to watch that YouTube video, it will talk a lot about cold protection. I'm going to put a short 10 to 15 minute video today on my Facebook page going over the highlights of plant protection. And Dr. Lester and I will discuss it tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Every Thursday, we have the virtual plant clinic, which you can find the links to on my Facebook page, as well as on Hernando County Extension's Facebook page. But if you go to Hernando County Government YouTube, you will find, this will be my 99th video that I have on there. So it's a great rabbit hole to get lost down to find out more information about Florida-friendly landscaping. I also have Twitter and Instagram. Here's some more information. I do have these YouTube programs you might want to look specifically for on my playlist. Florida Fall Flower Power. That's where you're going to find the names of our cool season flowers. Tiny Gardens, Big Impact, talks more about container gardening. If you're really into natives, look up that native plant starter kit, or the pollinator plant starter kit, or look up University of Florida publications and container gardenings. I'll get it out. Container gardens for outdoor spaces. Here are our upcoming classes on Wednesday the 4th at 10 a.m. It'll be a virtual class just like this one, Hernando's Water Rules. It's more than just the 1 day a week, and it is a pretty interesting class to find out, all the details about that. On the 11th, I will be in person at the Spring Hill Library on Spring Hill Drive, and talking about Florida-friendly landscaping for the part-time resident. If you can't make that, it's already on YouTube as well. Then I have a rain barrel workshop coming up. If you're interested in rain barrels and live in Hernando County, email me, LillyB at hernandocounty.us. And at the end of January, a 10 o'clock virtual class, water. What are you doing to protect our springs? Thank you for joining me. And again, my email is LillyB at hernandocounty.us. And stay with me if you're watching live, but I'm going to turn off the recording and then I will address your chat. But thank you, everybody, and have a great holiday season. and a wonderful Florida-friendly week.